Hello everyone, I'm Forrest McFeelova and this is Speedplay Papal Italy number 14. We left off having nearly fully occupied North Germany, and with our war against Bavaria just declared, we are going to justify a liberate country war against the Russians, as Poland-Lithuania won't actually connect with the bits we're going to get from the North Germans and the bits that we've taken from Austria unless we go to war with the Russians as well. And the timing works very well, because by the time our casus belli is done being fabricated against the Russians, we should be able to fabricate a casus belli against the French as well. So we're going to go ahead and build up our army quite a bit, just because I'm not actually certain that we have enough forces to win a two-front war against both the Russians and the French. Because once we go to war with the French, we're also going to go to war with the British about 150 days after, when we're able to get a casus belli on them as well. Now, I start getting our armies ready in North Africa, and I take a good look at the sizable force we already have, and that's probably going to be enough to turn the tide in our favor, so we'll start rolling those out onto the French border, or maybe just onto the Russian, depending. The war against Bavaria is taking slightly longer than I would have liked, because they mobilized their population, and that gave them some significant numbers. Ultimately, though, I believe the war doesn't go beyond about 250,000 killed on their side, and we did significantly better. Although at this point we are starting to lose the advantage of having gas attack, as other countries are starting to get gas defense as well. At any rate, with the Bavarians now on our side, we are one step closer. China is now a great power, and will probably continue to take back their cores. I imagine the Russian territory in China won't be too long-lasting once we actually get to war against the Russians. Now, we do go ahead and justify that claim against the French. We'll cut them down to size. We send our armies into the Russian Empire, and we're just going to essentially blitzkrieg them from our North German occupied territories. We win the first 3 battles just immediately. The Russians supposedly have more than 600,000 men, something around 850,000. However, I don't see where they are. And quite frankly, we just roll forward into their territories. After we've won those initial skirmishes, we just keep going. We're going to start pulling forces away from Africa in a bit greater numbers, as we are going to go to war with the French fairly soon. Our forces are doing quite well. The Russians have about 100 million people. So if they mobilize, and I believe they have, then we could face quite a significant enemy force in the near future. And we are getting dangerously far into their territory. However, I'm not ultimately that concerned. They do attack us, which will be the first battle since the very initial entry of our forces into the war. And we do end up attacking their forces in a couple areas. Now, at this point, we have just so many overwhelming numbers that I do start actually attacking the Russians, and the battles still go in our favor. Even though we are still in the era of history where the defense is heavily favored, we are making it through without really anything slowing us down or threatening to stop us. And so we just keep gunning it forward. The Russian armies are all basically just being destroyed in our path, and we can look forward to a long period of occupation, except it looks as though they're actually willing to just give in to our demands right now. So we go ahead and just accept it. That was an incredibly straightforward thing. We got a 100% war score relatively easily, and now we're going to start pulling our forces over to the French border to just absolutely overwhelm the French. Poland-Lithuania will manage to get all of their cores once we peace out with the North Germans. We're not going to peace out with the North Germans just yet, as it is incredibly convenient using their territory as a staging ground for whatever we really feel like doing. Unfortunately, there is now a crisis. The British are supporting Afghanistan against Japan and Punjab, which apparently has a bit of an empire of its own going on. And while that isn't entirely relevant to us, and we can't even get involved in it since we're at war with the North Germans, the thing that really affects us is that we cannot declare a war, I believe, as a great power or against a great power while the crisis is occurring. Also, the Russians are having a communist rebellion, but it is not at their capital, so they probably won't fall. At any rate, that means that we're basically stuck where we're at. We will have a casus belli against the British prepared fairly soon, However, by the time the crisis is finally triggered, there will be the issue that our casus belli against the French may have expired. So we may be forced to wait about 145 extra days, plus this 1 year that we're losing. However, all we really want from the French is military access through so we can get to the Great British area, and we'll have our war against Britain basically right now. We just have to wait for them to actually declare the crisis war or negotiate outside of it. Now, no great power is actually getting involved in this crisis, so they're all going to take a prestige hit if it goes to war, which is alright. The Russians, French, and Chinese are just not getting involved whatsoever, and we do have casus bellis on basically the Western powers we need to go ahead and attack, although I am fairly certain that that won't last. There are a few budding rebellions in North Germany. We go ahead and fight them slightly, and generally just hope for some jingoism, which is really just the constant theme of this. Our armies are coming together though, so we're spending some time getting tanks just sent out to the front. We are producing the most of all military all military items. Cars, interestingly enough though, the French outproduce us significantly. So the French have a thriving automotive industry that we're going to probably crush in a few moments. We do get a massive communist uprising. Luckily, it's mainly in the hinterlands. And quite frankly, with these rebellions, the only thing you need to worry about is if they spawn in on your capital and seize it before you can get forces there. At any rate, that's not going to happen. Luckily, we are heavily militarized, and we do have general gas attack to help us against rebellions. So this rebellion isn't going to go anywhere. And I make a note of looking at our population before and after the rebellion, and it goes up by, I'm not sure if it's 8,000 or 800, some level. It goes up significantly despite the rebellion and all of our people getting fought. So it isn't as though it even slowed us down whatsoever. And I believe we have eclipsed the British Empire in population. We are second only to China now, and only by 1 million people. However, as they reconquer their territories and take control over the rest of China proper, they're going to just eclipse us totally. And no amount of African territories is really going to help us there. We do declare war on the British now that the crisis is fired. They're now at war with Japan as well as us. No other great power joined, so sadly we won't see an AI world war. Although that would have been quite interesting. It appears as though all the other powers in the world were more or less just waiting for us to get involved so they could side against us, perhaps. And at any rate, they didn't seem at all enthused by the prospect of fighting for Afghani freedom. So that's a bummer. That would have been the deathbed of several empires. At any rate, it'll either be the deathbed of the British or the Japanese. We'll see how that goes. And ultimately, we spend this time just occupying their African holdings. We do fairly poorly in a couple battles. However, we still have enough men, and they have just a small enough presence that it doesn't really matter too much. At any rate, we're going to have to wait until we are able to declare war on the French before we can make any actual progress. We do have an army in a boat, or an army in a navy right off their English Channel. So we could at any point drop about 30,000 men on the British. We're not going to do that though. We'll just keep our men in our boats as a reserve. We can go to war against the French, against their one remaining colony, so we do that. They do have their army on our border though, which is rather intelligent of them. I believe they have something like 600,000 men under arms, which immediately they use to attack us in a few instances. We're going to just shovel our armies at them. We have significantly more than they do. So we're going to just keep reinforcing those battles. We are doing slightly worse than we have been in previous engagements. That's mainly just because they now have roughly equivalent techs with us. Gas attack is not going to help us on Western battlefields any longer. The British and French both have the ability to withstand gas attack, which is slightly sad for our overwhelming dominance. However, we're still very powerful, and we do just have sheer force of numbers. They are occupying one of our mountain territories. We just surround that army, and we may just leave them there for the rest of the war. Ultimately, we could go ahead and just overwhelm the army with numbers, however that would cost us quite a few losses. We do get an event for jingoism, so we're going to force the North German Confederation to release Prussia in their South German exclave. We're also going to add an additional war goal against the British, just taking their other colony in sub-Saharan Africa, and we will cut the French down to size. Not because we actually need to, just because we're able to. And that means we won't have to deal with such a large army in 5 years when the truce ends. Although they will probably start building their army back up the moment they can. We also kind of doomed the French to political instability by doing this. They did have a large Jacobin uprising earlier, and if they can't build their army back up to defend their government, they'll probably go through a cycle of rebellions, which will hopefully take the communists out of power and destroy their industrial score. That's the plan at any rate. We'll see how that goes in the future. We do make peace with the North Germans, getting Poland-Lithuania all of their cores. We don't get any decision to form the South German Confederation as a puppet state. I wasn't really expecting one, however we basically doomed the Germans. Here are the losses in our French war, 200,000 of our men and 650,000 of theirs. You'll notice we have even less, or the Russians lost almost 500,000 and we lost 100,000. I noticed that some Chinese wars had occurred that were rather significant, so we're just going to take a moment to look at these. The Russians lost quite a few men in their invasion of China, so that's probably why they were so weak. However, that was a very long time ago. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Have a great day.